Welcome to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast, a place where ideas, principles, and personalities come together to give you a ministry advantage that empowers the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here are your hosts, Marianne Howard, Ron Hunter, and Josh Wooten.
Well, guys, I'm excited about our guest today. She's going to bring the heat, and it's about to get your pen ready. Get your pen ready. This is such an excellent interview. There's so much good, rich stuff in this interview. But before we get into Mama Bear, speaking of Mama Bear, I wanted to talk about bears on this podcast. Have you guys ever seen bears in their natural habitat? Tell us some stories about your encounter with bears.
Oh my goodness. One of our favorite places to vacation for Lena and I is Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Well, it's like the Great Smoky Mountain National Forest, and there are bears everywhere up there. It's actually more uncommon to not see a bear when you're in that area of the country than. That's right. I mean, we were driving down the parkway there one day, and all of a sudden, just a bear comes just strolling right across the street, and it wasn't even scared of the car. It literally stopped across the road, and then we just kind of looked at him for a while, and we had a moment where we just, for 30, 45 seconds, just staring at each other and having that little connection. So it's really cool to see them in their natural habitat.
Awesome.
Absolutely. I'm with Josh. That's exactly where my mind went. Being in Tennessee, I think everybody's made the journey to Mecca, over to Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge area. And it's not uncommon to see a bear just kind of pop its head up off the road somewhere. Or better yet, here's the more common one. You ask in their natural habitat, which this violates that boundary. But it's common for bears to come up near your cabins looking for garbage you might have left around, or to dig through the actual garbage can. Garbage cans are sealed, locked, and protected when you put it in there. They're not just the lids like you have in every other part of the country. When you're around bears, you have to deal with your food. And if you're sleeping out in the woods, you have to raise that food up on a pulley system and get it high enough off the ground to where the bears cannot come in and get at your camp. You definitely do not want to keep it in your tent.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, my boys are dying to see a bear. We haven't seen one yet.
Well, I think we could remedy that for them. You just need to come over here this fall, see the autumn change of leaves, and catch a bear or two.
Oh, yes.
So,
well, speaking of bears, our guest, Hillary Morgan Ferrer, is the founder of Mama Bear Apologetics, and she is going to be talking today about learning how to raise kids that think critically, love biblically, and stand firm against cultural tide.
She's absolutely excellent, and I'm excited to hear her talk. If you guys are not familiar with her books, her blog, and she would quickly say she's part of a team of writers that's in the book and the blog, and they are very gifted at their insights and taking the difficult concepts down to a wonderful kid level. And just listen to her as she talks about the fact that the world is discipling our kids. And if we're not leaning in and being part of that discipling process, we're going to lose that battle. Let's listen to Hillary Morgan and catch some commentary on the other side.
Introducing D6 Everyday Foundations, strengthening the building blocks of faith. We are thrilled to announce the launch of D6 Everyday Foundations, a groundbreaking curriculum designed to empower churches and families in their journey of faith. This innovative program aims to align the church and home, fostering a strong foundation and unshakable confidence in God's Word. D6 Everyday Foundations boasts a comprehensive 3-year scope, focusing on major themes and characters from the Bible while also addressing pertinent cultural issues. With this curriculum, we aim to equip individuals of all ages to stand firm in their faith and navigate the challenges of our ever-changing world. At the heart of D6 Everyday Foundations is a church and home partnership, recognizing the vital role both play in nurturing and cultivating a vibrant faith. Through this collaboration, families will be empowered to prioritize and emphasize God's Word in their daily lives. Together, let's lay the foundation for a generation grounded in truth and empowered to impact the world around them. Let's hold the building blocks of faith firmly in place. To order D6 Everyday Foundations and embark on this exciting journey of faith, visit d6family.com today.
We are live from the D6 conference in Orlando, Florida, and today I'm joined by Hillary Morgan Ferrer. Hillary is the founder of Mama Bear Apologetics and has a burden for providing accessible apologetics resources for busy moms. She has a master's in biology, and her specialties are in cultural apologetics, the relationship between science and faith, and understanding the root causes of doubt. Hillary, I've been looking forward to this conversation. We have just had some conversations off camera where we're connecting some dots back to Biola days and things of that nature. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So for the people who are listening who have no clue what Mama Bear Apologetics is, will you just fill them in?
Yeah, so Mama Bear Apologetics is basically taking that mom instinct, like women can be all sweet and maternal until you start messing with their kids, and then all of a sudden you're going to see a beast rise up that you wish you could keep. You wish you could keep that genie in the bottle because it will terrify you and she will mess you up. So how do we take that instinct of protecting our kids and turn it towards something that is going to be protecting them from what is going on in culture? So Mama Bear Apologetics is just teaching them how to defend their faith and preparing them for the bad arguments and just the bad examples of Christianity that they're going to see as they're growing up.
Yeah, so is Mama Bear Apologetics just a book? Because I've read your book. So is it just one book or what else is it?
Okay, so yeah, we have it started out as just a website and a podcast. And then it wasn't too much longer that we had a publisher reach out to us asking to publish a book. So we looked at what apologetics resources there were currently out there for parents and for kids. And a lot of them were addressing specific questions and specific answers to specific questions, which is absolutely great. But what I did, me and the team, we put all these questions on a board, and then we try to say what worldview is actually undergirding these questions. What are causing these questions in the first place? Because if we can really till the soil of that worldview and have them grow up with a biblical worldview and be able to understand and recognize worldviews like postmodernism and feminism and skepticism and moral relativism, Marxism, all these different things, these questions won't make sense in the first place. So something like materialist naturalism says that the material world is all you have. So when kids hear about that, they say, well, then who made God, and does science disprove God? But once they realize that science is a tool, but it doesn't explain or encompass all of reality, well, then that idea of can science disprove God doesn't even make sense at that point. So we're really trying to get underneath the foundations, the bad foundations that have been laid that just kind of slipped in there unnoticed. And so the second book is Mama Bear Apologetics Guide to Sexuality, empowering your kids to... Oh my gosh, and I just forgot the name of my own book, Empowering Your Kids to Understand and Live Out God's Design. I knew I had it. And so that's looking kind of, I call it the dumpster fire du jour right now, that what's going on in culture and just how do we start out on a firm foundation. What are the worldviews that have been sneaking in, being taught to kids in the schools and through media and music and all the different things? And then what are some specific practical areas like pornography and same-sex attraction and transgenderism, and even addressing purity culture and some of the damages that were done through purity culture back in the, I don't know, like if you were...
True Love Waits movement and all of that.
So that book came out, I think, or not True Love Waits, I Kissed Dating Goodbye came out sometime maybe in high school. Maybe it was right after high school. But yeah, our youth group did the purity rings and stuff like that. And I mean, there's a lot of people it worked well for. It worked for me. It worked for my husband. It worked for a lot of people that I know. But there were some churches that took it and turned it into this way of making you feel just dirty and impure, and like your salvation was contingent upon being a virgin. And so we kind of address some of the abuses of that within the book as well.
Awesome. Great resources. Check those out. So for the person listening who the cultural things the topics that are kind of hot topics right now that you just like listed off like it was nothing, for the person who's like, I don't even know the word she just said, right? I mean, as a parent, it can feel like we are trying to not shield our kids from things, but help them understand when we don't even understand. Yeah. Can you speak to that parent? Like, can you, I don't know, give them a balm here,
yes.
You know?
So I can tell you what the feedback has been from especially the first book is that it's all these things that parents have already noticed. It's not loading them up with new information. It's giving them the words to talk about what they already see going on. And so as my husband likes to describe it, it's like a label maker for everything in culture that you say, oh, I understand that. Oh, I've seen that happening. Oh, I've seen that happening. Now I have the words to not only understand it, because I always tell parents, we cannot refute that which we don't understand. And so if you look at the role of elder in Titus, where it talks about an elder, his role is to teach sound doctrine and to refute those who oppose it. A lot of times that idea of refuting the unsound doctrine just kind of gets passed over. We are the elders in our homes, and so we have the responsibility to be able to teach sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it. And we can't refute that which we don't understand. And so my goal in these books is to take these kind of real complicated topics and put them into bite-sized ways to where you can, the parent themselves can understand it to the point of when they can feel empowered to now start training up their child to recognize them as well. And so I've gotten a lot of really great feedback that system is working.
Yeah, absolutely. I've read it, and it's so... It feels like I can do this.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
That's what it feels like.
That's exactly what I wanted to feel like.
Well, that's great. You mission accomplished.
Hashtag nailed it.
I have passed it along to friends, and we'll continue to. We're going to continue this conversation after this quick break.
We are excited to introduce you to a remarkable new book that will transform your approach to children's ministry. The Faith of Our Children, 8 Timely Research Insights for Discipling the Next Generation by Matt Markins. If you're a children's ministry leader, you know the profound impact early faith formation can have on young lives. In The Faith of Our Children, Matt Markins, President and CEO of Awana, a global leader in child discipleship, delves into the primary areas that lay the foundation for a lasting faith. This book serves as an indispensable guide, equipping you and your team with the insights and systems needed to cultivate faith that endures. Download a free chapter of The Faith of Our Children at d6family.com.
So we are talking to Hillary Morgan Ferrer, Mama Bear Apologetics, which I completely relate to the Mama Bear aspect, right? I love the fact, though, that my husband and I work together as a team.
Yes.
And one of the things I adore about him is that as we are, as a family, consuming media of any kind. It might be a song we just heard, it might be a movie we just watched, or a show, or a book that we're reading together, something like that. He is amazing at asking the questions to our boys. All right, what worldview do you think the author has here? What are some of the themes that we see? What do you think the characters believe about God? Just in processing that media.
That's so good.
Tell me, I think I know the answer to this, but what's the benefit of that?
Yes.
What if we don't do that? Is there a danger if we don't?
Yes, there absolutely is a danger. So I like to compare these ideologies to viruses in the sense that a virus can't replicate on its own. What it does is it has its own DNA that it then puts inside another cell, and that other cell begins replicating it. So sometimes it's not the worldviews that are obviously bad that we need to watch out for. It's the ones that are uncritically absorbed. absorbed by our kids that we need to prepare them for. And so what the immune system is supposed to do, and especially with vaccines, is when it encounters this virus, it learns how to recognize it. So that way, if it ever gets an onslaught of even more of these little virus particles, the body is already prepared to say, you are not part of our body, you are not taking over our cells, and we're going to take you down to Chinatown, take care of business. And so that is kind of what we're doing with our kids, that we need to be going through all these different worldviews as they're encountering it, because if we don't, the world is discipling our children into their worldview. Our kids need to have that spiritual immune system so that they can recognize this is not part of my biblical worldview. In fact, I remember my mom and my dad talking about this. Here are the reasons why this is false, and I can reject that. And they can start, the older they get, the more you practice doing this, of recognizing these worldviews, the more they're going to be able to kind of take what is good, because it's like we're never going to find a movie or music, that's 100% everything that we agree with.
Right.
It's like even the Bible can be misused. If the Bible can be misused, basically anything can be misused. But they'll be able to sift through it and say, this is the good, this is the bad. I'm going to accept the good, reject the bad.
Yeah. One of the things you just said that I'm pretty sure, like my mind hung up on, and I'm pretty sure there are listeners who, you said the words, the world is discipling our kids. Tell us about that.
Yes. So discipleship is really not only teaching you what is true, but then modeling how that truth interacts with reality, and then showing how all of reality reflects this truth that you just taught them. And so the world is trying to teach them things like there is no biological gender, or that sexuality is the highest goal that you can attain. If you want to be sexually fulfilled, that is the greatest good that you can possibly have. Being true to yourself is one of the highest things that you can attain. And then they're showing them all the different places. See, this person's praised for all these decisions. This person's praised. They're teaching our kids what to crave. They're teaching our kids what affirmation and from whom they want to have affirmation. And they're teaching our kids basically what is true about the world, and it is against what God has said about our world. And so they are actively doing it. It's not a passive process anymore. They are actively going after the children. And so if we're not countering that, then there's going to be a problem. There's a psychologist named Daniel Kahneman. I think he wrote Thinking Fast and Slow, and he has a statement in his book about how the brain has a hard time distinguishing between that which is true and that which is familiar. So think about that. The more someone hears something, the more true it sounds, the more they basically absorb that. So we need to make sure that the biblical worldview, they hear just as much as that worldly worldview. Mm-hmm. And this means that you're going to be saying a lot of stuff that they're like, I know, Mom, I know, Dad, and their eyes are rolling in the back of their head because you've said it so many times. I always say, when you get that eye roll and the I know, that's proof you're doing something right, and keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what you're saying then is our kids are being discipled whether we are doing it or not.
Oh,
They're
yes.
being discipled to something.
They are being discipled into something. We just, you can control, they're being discipled into something. We need to be purposeful in what they're being discipled into.
So give us practicality here. Like what are ways I can go home to my 4 boys and be discipling them in the way in a biblical way as opposed to the world? How are those things that you're saying we have to be combating that worldly discipleship with a godly discipleship? How can we combat that worldview with a biblical worldview?
Yeah, so one of the things that we talk about in our first book, and we'll probably use this in a lot of subsequent books, is the ROAR technique.
Right.
And the ROAR technique stands for recognize the message. Basically, sounds like what your husband's already doing, saying what is the message being championed? What values do these characters have? Recognizing what's going on and just being able to turn your brain on and critically think through that itself is half the battle. The second step, offering objective discernment, means we're seeing this accurately, but offering discernment doesn't mean we go and point out everything that's wrong with everything. I think a lot of people think of discernment ministries and people are just going out and pointing out what's wrong. We see in Bible that discernment is also being able to recognize what is good. So a lot of times what you have are lies that are wrapped in partial truths. In fact, the more potent the lie, the more partial truths that it is wrapped in. And so how can I recognize the truths? Because we don't want to toss everything out. So someone might be seeing a problem that we couldn't agree with. or someone might be seeing a hurt that someone is struggling with, that we want to say, yeah, I see that hurt. Or, they may have motives of what they're trying to do. And we can say, you know what, I affirm what you're trying to do. I don't think this is necessarily the way to that solution, but I want to hear what you're saying, and I want to affirm what you're saying. So finding all those things you can affirm first before you divide out, pull out the lies that have snuck in with those truths. So recognize the message, offer objective discernment, argue for a healthier approach. Now we're going to look at the things that we've divided, the good and the bad, and we're going to say, how does the Bible actually address this? Because usually the Bible has addressed these concepts, and it does it in a way that's not going to bite you in the butt. Five more steps down the road, it's going to be lasting change. It's going to be lasting solutions. So we're going to argue from Scripture a healthier approach to the problem that we are all now linked arm in arm agreeing on. And then finally reinforce through discussion, discipleship, and prayer. So the discussion, having those purposeful conversations, discipleship, modeling the truth of this worldview that you've now just kind of picked apart and said, this is what we reject, this is what we embrace. And then prayer, because sometimes we are dealing with a spiritual stronghold, and we're dealing with people who are spiritually blind. And there is nothing we can do, no winsomeness that we can have, no argument so sound that is going to fix someone who has a spiritual stronghold or has spiritual blindness.
Yeah. So what about the person who's listening who's like, I don't even have kids, or maybe like I just had a baby, or maybe the parents who are like, man, my kids are adults now. Like, how can you encourage each? I know those are different.
Those are very different.
Different messages, but can you encourage each of those people listening right now?
Yeah, so first off, the ones that maybe don't have kids yet, we like to say that Mama Bear is for mothers of physical, adopted, foster, or spiritual children. Mm-hmm. And so we have a lot of Mama Bears out there who don't realize that they have permission to be a Mama Bear even if they don't have kids, because they have kids that they're pouring into. I think it's ironic that the Lord called me to this ministry because my husband and I don't have kids. Mm-hmm. And so I think that you can be really pouring into the next generation no matter where you are. Now, for the ones that are little, you are getting them at a place where you can repeat truth. In fact, the second book on sexuality has an afterword titled Things to Repeat to Your Kids Until They Want to Gag. That you start reinforcing this worldview. Things like what you do with your body matters. Think about how this generation right now would be different if they had had parents who said what you do with your body matters from the time that they were little. We would have just a radically different we'd see things being done very, very differently if that had been instilled in them. So when they're young, you can start out with those foundational truths. If your kids are getting older and you might have missed the boat, well, that I've had so many mama bears of either grown-up kids or grandmama bears saying, I feel like I've completely failed on this. What do I do from here? And I would say this is where your kids are old enough to really be able to have conversations. This is an excellent time where you can say, you know what, I need to apologize to you for something. There is something that I should have been doing, and I did not do this right. And will you forgive me? And then say, I would like to talk about these ideas. Would you be willing to talk with me about some of these? And maybe just opening up that conversation with them. Now, once they're adults and out of your house, there's a lot less control you can have over that. There's a lot less influence. But there's so many walls that come down when you start out from a spirit of humility that I don't think we can underestimate that.
Yeah. Well, Hillary, thank you so much for sharing with us today. Thanks for being at D6.
Yeah.
It's been fun having you, and we hope you come back.
Thank you so much.
Well, I just absolutely love her perspective. And she said just I'm a visual connector, and she used some really brilliant visual connection pieces. The first one that came out that I absolutely loved was when she said, we've got to become the label maker for culture. Parents have got to be the label maker for culture. And we can't refute that which we do not understand.
That was my catch-all phrase there. I'm like, okay. Yeah. We can't argue it if we don't have some understanding.
And I loved even her take on that, we're called as elders, we're elders in our home, and we are to refute unsound doctrine. Thank you, Hillary, for empowering me as a mom and empowering our listeners today to own and step into that God-given place as mother, father, aunt, spiritual mother, spiritual father, grandparent, whatever that role is for you, you are the elder to refute unsound doctrine. And we've got to be the label makers with sound doctrine.
What I like also, she didn't just leave it at label. It's one thing to label it. It's another thing to help our kids understand what that label means.
Yes.
And that's where her heart is. And I love that about her.
Well, the way she put it as we need to give our kids a spiritual immune system,
Yes.
that was just a very powerful illustration for me. When we talk about worldview, we have to talk about the world as it is, but also contradict that with biblical truth,
That's right.
and sometimes because they're getting messages from everywhere. And she's talking about the more you hear something, the more true it sounds. And our kids are getting so many messages. So we have to help our children understand in their brains distinguish what is true and what is just familiar to them.
So let's borrow that language for a minute, Josh. The inoculation. When we inoculate someone, we're giving them a little bit of serum of that which is dangerous. If you get snake bit, they're going to use snake venom as an antidote. When we get, shots at the doctor, they're putting a little bit of that which they hope we do not catch into our immune system so it absorbs it in the correct way. Parents who want to avoid the world, not talk about the world, not talk about these items, are not inoculating. We've got to engage that which is bad in conversation with our kids and help them process it helpfully. I just want our listeners to catch that. We cannot hide and pretend it's not going to get to them. We can't say, oh, my kid's in a Christian school, they're in a Christian church, they're in a Christian home, therefore this wonderful magic bubble is going to prevent them from, and I can name a whole litany of things they're scared to death their kids are going to get. I'm sorry, I battle legalism from my background, and that isolationist approach is the most harmful thing we can do to our kids.
It's not setting them for success when they are no doubt going to be confronted with an opposing view.
Yes.
And so often when you are raised in that bubble, those kids, a lot of times I've seen it, will get outside of it and just run and rebel and embrace it because it's all new and fresh and there haven't been conversations about it. When we're told to be in the world, but not of the world, some people are not even of it. Like they're not in it,
Yeah.
at all.
It's the same thing with salt and light. Salt was never meant to be in the shaker. Unless it's in the recipe in which it's trying to influence, it's of no value. Light is of no value unless it's piercing darkness. We've got to teach our kids how to get into the recipe and into the darkness and pierce it with the good.
That's right.
Yeah, I just love. And again, let me just go ahead and have you Google Mama Bear Apologetics. We have their books on d6family.com. You can obviously find them on other websites as well. And if you like this kind of content, then you're going to love the speakers at our D6 conference, which is, right around the corner now. We're approaching the end of the year. We're approaching a price break as well. And if you'd like to save some money, maybe you've got some budget in your church budget that's still in this year, and you'd like to go ahead and get your team lined up to come to our conference. Imagine listening to 10 to 12 of Hillary type speakers of various topics, all on the main stage, and another 70 to 80 in breakouts, just equipping you with the power that you hear on this podcast in so many ways. So please check out d6family.com. Her resources, the conference, and the curriculum that teaches apologetics week in and week out. We want to equip you, and we want to help you step into these moments. Next week, we're going to be visiting with Matt Morgan. You'll want to check this out. We're getting into the holidays. It's approaching the end of the year, and we like living out the holidays with you. Until then, we hope you have a great time, and we're praying for you to be that label maker and explain what's happening to your kids.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.